The morning air was crisp in Providence, Rhode Island, as Sarah Jenkins walked toward the courthouse, her daughter Janice's small hand clasped tightly in hers. The 6-year-old skipped along beside her mother, blissfully unaware of the weight that burdened Sarah's shoulders. "Are we going to see important people today, Mommy?" Janice asked, her curious eyes taking in the imposing building before them. Sarah managed a smile despite her anxiety. "Yes, sweetie, we're going to see a judge." From the outside, Sarah's court appearance seemed inconsequential, a simple parking violation with a $100 fine. But for a single mother working 3 waitressing jobs and barely making ends meet, that $100 represented a week's worth of groceries, a utility bill, or part of their modest apartment's rent. As they entered the courtroom, Sarah's eyes nervously scanned the faces of court officials and the public gallery. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had rehearsed her explanation repeatedly, clinging to a desperate hope that her circumstances might warrant some leniency. The parking violation had occurred while she'd been picking up antibiotics for Janice's ear infection, a quick stop where she'd pulled up to the curb, intending to dash into the pharmacy and back. Now that moment of urgency had transformed into a financial crisis. Janice, meanwhile, gazed around the wood-paneled courtroom with wide-eyed fascination. The high ceilings, the polished benches, the formal atmosphere, it was like nothing she'd ever seen before. Her innocent wonder stood in stark contrast to her mother's quiet desperation. "All rise," came the announcement, and the courtroom fell silent as Judge Frank Caprio entered. Even before taking his seat, Judge Caprio noticed the young mother and her daughter. In his 30 years on the bench, he had developed a reputation for compassion and fairness. He believed that justice wasn't just about enforcing rules, it was about understanding people and their circumstances. He had a particular soft spot for children in his courtroom. They brought a rare authenticity to the otherwise formal proceedings. When Sarah's case was called, she approached the bench with Janice trailing behind her. The little girl's sneakers squeaked on the polished floor as they moved forward. "Your Honor," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I want to be completely honest with you about what happened." She explained the circumstances of that day, finishing her morning shift at the diner, rushing to pick up Janice's prescription before heading to her afternoon job at the cafe. She had parked hastily, the "no parking" sign partially obscured by overgrown branches. "I know I made a mistake," she admitted, "but I was worried about my daughter's medication." Judge Caprio listened attentively, noting how Sarah carefully avoided mentioning her financial struggles in front of Janice. He could read between the lines, the worn edges of her purse, the darned sleeve of her only formal shirt, the way she kept glancing at her daughter with a mixture of love and worry. After Sarah finished speaking, Judge Caprio's gaze shifted to Janice, who was fidgeting quietly beside her mother. "And who might this young lady be?" he asked with a warm smile. "This is my daughter Janice," Sarah replied, placing a protective hand on the child's shoulder. Judge Caprio's eyes twinkled. "Janice, would you like to come up here and help me with something important?" The courtroom stirred with interest. This was a departure from the usual procedural monotony. Janice looked up at her mother, who nodded encouragingly despite her surprise. The little girl approached the bench cautiously. "We need a booster seat for this important judicial assistant," Judge Caprio announced, signaling to his bailiff. A moment later, Janice was seated on a small stool next to the judge, her legs dangling several inches above the floor. "Now, Janice," the judge said, his tone grandfatherly and kind, "how has your day been so far?" The little girl's initial shyness melted away. "It's been okay. Mommy said we had to come here because she got in trouble." Several soft chuckles rippled through the courtroom. "Well, not exactly trouble," Judge Caprio clarified. "Your mom parked her car somewhere she wasn't supposed to when she was getting medicine for you. Now, I need to decide what should happen next. Would you like to help me make that decision?" Janice nodded solemnly, suddenly aware of the responsibility being placed on her small shoulders. "Here are our options," the judge continued. "Your mom could pay the full fine of $100, or she could pay part of it, or—" He paused thoughtfully. "Do you have any ideas?" The courtroom fell silent as everyone watched the little girl deliberate, her forehead wrinkled in concentration, a miniature version of her mother's worried expression. "Maybe," Janice began hesitantly, "maybe she could pay half. Like $50? Judge Caprio nodded approvingly. That's a very fair suggestion. You'd make an excellent judge someday. Janice beamed with pride, but Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. Janice, I have one more question for you. Have you had breakfast today? The question caught everyone by surprise, including Sarah, whose breath caught in her throat. Janice shook her head. No, sir. Mommy said we had to hurry so we wouldn't be late. Judge Caprio nodded, as if this confirmed something important. I see. Well, I have another idea. What if, instead of your mom paying any fine at all, she promised to take you out for breakfast right after we're done here? Would that be a fair solution? Janice's eyes widened. She looked at her mother, then back at the judge, and nodded enthusiastically. Yes, I think that would be very fair. The courtroom erupted into gentle laughter and approving murmurs. Sarah's eyes brimmed with tears of relief and gratitude. Judge Caprio turned to Sarah. Mrs. Jenkins, the court's ruling is as follows. The ticket is dismissed on the condition that you fulfill your breakfast obligation to your daughter immediately following these proceedings. Do you accept these terms? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah managed, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Case dismissed, Judge Caprio declared, bringing down his gavel with a smile. And Janice, thank you for your help today. You've taught us all something important about justice and compassion. As Sarah and Janice left the courtroom hand in hand, the weight that had been pressing on Sarah's shoulders felt considerably lighter. What had begun as a day of anxiety and fear had transformed into an unexpected lesson in kindness and understanding. For Judge Frank Caprio, this was just one of many cases where he chose to see beyond the letter of the law to the human being standing before him. His approach to justice wasn't about being soft or lenient. It was about recognizing that behind every case number was a person with a story, struggles, and dignity. In the small diner across from the courthouse, Sarah watched her daughter happily devouring pancakes with syrup-sticky fingers. The $100 she had been prepared to somehow scrape together would now go toward their rent, and the knot of anxiety in her stomach had finally begun to unravel. Mommy, Janice said between bites, I think that judge was really nice. Sarah smiled, truly smiled, for the first time that day. Yes, he was, sweetheart. He's a person who understands that sometimes life gets complicated, and sometimes we all need a little kindness. The story of Judge Caprio's compassion spread throughout Providence and beyond. It wasn't just about a dismissed parking ticket. It was a powerful reminder that the justice system works best when it remembers the humanity of those it serves. In courtrooms across America, most judicial proceedings follow a strict interpretation of the law. But in Judge Caprio's courtroom, there was room for something else. The recognition that sometimes the spirit of the law, justice tempered with mercy, matters more than its rigid application. For Sarah and Janice, their encounter with Judge Caprio changed more than just their morning. It restored their faith in a system that, at its best, could see them not just as case numbers, but as people deserving of dignity and understanding.